Hi, I'm Christina.charenkova. Welcome to Make Change Happen. Today we're talking about change leadership in the age of AI. My guest is Shipley. She'll be making the case for us to stop managing the rollouts and start leading the humans. In 1989, she wrote an article called Whatever Happened to AI? Since then, she's written 3 books on how work is changing. 2 years ago on this broadcast, Chris told us that the slowest pace of change we'd ever experienced again was right then. And she was right. Her new book, Leading for Tomorrow, is out this month. The one takeaway we want you to leave with today is the fact that continuous change is our reality. It doesn't need another framework. It needs leaders looking after the teams of humans in the middle of it. One deliberate move at a time. By the end of the episode, we will equip you with a simple change leadership checklist you can use today to shift behavior from managing to leading. And without further ado, Shipley, welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be back with you.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here with us, Chris. I know with the book launch, you have been busy and spreading the word. I want to pick up right where we left 2 years ago. We were talking about the fact that the slowest pace of change you're ever going to experience was right then, and you were right. What did the leaders who believed you did differently from the ones who waited for things to settle?
It's a really hard question to answer because I think we move back and forth from this place of, oh my goodness, all this change is happening, what do I do? To, okay, let's take a breather for a minute and relax in this rare moment of stability. And I think the folks who kind of understood that change is continuous, that it is not a shift from one state to another, but it's an ongoing process, have found ways to connect and embrace adaptability, to embrace learning, to embrace the unknown and uncertainty, and to get comfortable with that kind of discomfort. And not an easy thing to do. I think anyone who's on the sidelines saying it's okay, it's gonna slow down, things are gonna be better, and it'll get stable, are finding themselves in a place now where they've got a lot of catching up to do because they haven't been working on building the muscle of adaptability. So I think we're all in this big morass together. So it's really hard to say that there's like these people are getting it right and these people are really in trouble. I think we all go through cycles of, okay, now I'm good, I'm comfortable. Wait a minute, I'm not comfortable again. What do I do now? What I've come to realize, I in fact was just speaking with a change management expert the other day, that we think about change as we start in state 1 and then this mess happens and then we end up in a stable state 2. And that's not what happens anymore, right? It's every day it's something new, something different. One wave crashes on the other. And I've found myself in this conversation yesterday saying, I think we need another word. Now, I don't know what that word is. We talk about continuous change, but never's a very long time. I want to be careful not to imply that nothing will ever be stable again. But we don't get stability for very long. We don't get assurance and consistency for very long before some new disruption comes. And so there's got to be a different word for that, I think. I don't know what it is. And if anybody listening does, I'd love to hear the ideas because I think we need to find new language to talk about what it means to manage change and to lead through change when it's all change.
Yeah, I love this call that we need to find new language. I feel like the systems and the frameworks that we have built are very outdated, and we seem to be following advice that was created for a different world. Now the world has changed and we're not necessarily up to speed. Everything's moving way too fast. We feel like rabbits in the headlights.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally speaking my language now. I'm moving forward from this work to really look at what does it mean to re-examine, reimagine, and rebuild all these systems that were built for an economy, for a society, for civic structures that we're, kind of pre-industrial age, right? And we don't
Mm.
live in that anymore. And so to think, for example, an education system that was, at least in the United States, largely built for racking and stacking and filing people into jobs and careers, um, does it's more of a training system than an education system, and a ranking system than it was an education system. And now, where so much of so much knowledge is captured in large language models, we really do need to think about what true education means, which I think is about continuous learning and adaptability and critical thinking and lived experience, so that we can be that adaptable, always changing, always evolving, uh,
Mm.
both individuals, leaders, cultures, that I think this time demands.
Yeah, completely. And yet, I feel like the leaders, or some leaders that we still have, find it very hard to say, I don't know, and can we work it out together? Why is there such a hurdle?
You know, I, there, first I will agree and say I don't think that if you are a leader today and you've been in your career for 15, 20 years, let's say, what got you to this moment isn't going to get you where you need to go or where your teams need to go going forward. You're going to need different skills, and we can talk about that. But I think that what got you there or got you here for so many people was being the smartest one in the room, being having the most experience, knowing the answers, being able to sketch a strategy that worked. All of that experience and assurance, right? And so to say in the midst of any project, well, I have no idea, that's incredibly vulnerable. That's like saying, oh, I don't deserve to be in this leadership role, because leaders were meant to, by so many definitions, if not have the answers, know how to get to the answers, and be very confident and being very directive of their people. And that model, I don't think works when you when everything is, kind of, you're on uneven ground now. And
Mm.
so that vulnerability, and that's really what I think the answer to your question is, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to be vulnerable in front of people that you are meant to be leading in that kind of traditional sense. And so to say, boy, I don't know, makes you feel like, boy, maybe I shouldn't be in this leadership position if I don't know. I think the answer, I don't know, but let's find out together. How should we go about that? If this is the objective, what are the pathways we could take to get there? Let's go explore that. I think that's a very powerful message that doesn't necessitate that you know the exact answer.
Mm.
And so that kind of, we in the past would call it micromanaging. Here are your tasks, do these tasks, check them off, and you know, go hit the time clock on your way out the door. That kind of management, well, it is management, it's not leadership, and that's not working anymore when, again, all the answers are just not evident.
Mm. Yes, yes, completely. And when we were talking earlier, you touched on something that I'd love you to tell this audience a little bit more about. We were talking about the fact that it, although it's time of immense change, it's also a time of immense possibility, and exactly for the people that are starting to rise and maybe are feeling stuck a little bit in middle management, but now there's this possibility that they don't have that hung up from management and from leaders, that it has to be a very directional leadership. They can be a lot more inclusive. They can be a lot more collaborative. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I know you were explaining it beautifully.
Well, I'll try to explain beautifully again. I think what I think anytime there is disruption and chaos, there is also tremendous opportunity. And it's that opportunity that comes from imagination, from creativity, from collaboration, from, maybe it's rare vision that you see the thing that no one else sees. But it's also, I think, what comes when people come together to identify the moment and the opportunities that are in the moment, rather than fixating on what's the crisis in front of us. So what's on the other side of that disruption, the other side of that crisis, that gives us a chance to learn and grow. And I think that if you think about most organizations where this is happening all over the organization, right, especially in larger companies, there is no singular view on that whole thing, whatever the whole thing is, right? People are experiencing these direct disruptions in micro moments and in very large ones. This is, I think, the opportunity for individuals at any level in the organization to say, hey, I have an idea. I see something a little bit differently. Could we try? Or I went home last night and I talked to Claude and it came up with these answers and this one makes sense to me. Should we look at that further? Right? There's an opportunity to be proactive. And I think it is an opportunity to really reclaim your agency as a member of a community and an organization. Your one of the gifts, if you will, of our pandemic years was that it gave people a lot of agency to in how they work and how they communicate with their coworkers. And so, like embracing that agency to bring new solutions, new ideas, new direction to your collective team. I think that's one way people who might be in what we would traditionally call middle management roles can really differentiate themselves and stand out. And there's a lot of conversation right now about AI is going to take away the middle, right?
Right.
And I think AI will take away the middle of all of those details. Who's going to schedule and manage hours and do the accounting and the budgeting? AI can do a lot of that stuff. It's just not very good at being human. And so the real role of a manager in that middle level is, how do I work with the people around me, collaborate with those people to create new value? Is that something that AI is not going to do for you? It's not going to turn an empathetic ear to someone and really hear where they're coming from and see in them a lived experience that brings a new perspective that opens a door. And I know that kind of sounds a little vague when I say it that way, and that's partly deliberate because, again, we don't know what those doors are, what those experiences are. But I think we're moving from an economy where the role of the manager and the leader is to wring value out of all the resources, right, including human resources. And I think a lot of people who are burned out at work are often burned out because they've just been wrung dry, right? And I think we're reaching a natural end to that kind of an economic model. And the new model that comes after that is one of collaborative creation. And so I think the opportunity, again, in that middle layer is to model that. What does collaborative creation, value creation look like? And how can all of the people in your organization have a voice in that? Because I think it's all of those really far-ranging opinions and life experiences that give us insight into where things might be going and where new opportunities lie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it calls us to lean into the human side, right? And to be vulnerable, to be open to new ideas, to be open to change. Yet, up to date, and up until this moment, we've really been identifying our jobs with the things we do in our jobs. I compile a report, I run this function, I do this. Like a lot of that grunt work, the AI can take away and can speed it up and can give us opportunity to lean more into the human. I have this theory that we almost are suffering of an identity crisis. Who am I if I don't have the things that define me as an accountant, as a operations manager, as a business analyst, right? So do you find that people need to almost redefine who they are at work?
Well, yes is probably the short answer to the question. The longer answer is, and what you just said, I think the things that define, the functions that define who we are at work, I think you replace that with, what could I be at work? What could work mean to me? How could work be more meaningful to me? Not, am I really good at spreadsheets, or am I really good at writing reports, or am I really good at scheduling difficult, complex situations, whatever. But what is it that what do I love? We had a gathering over the weekend of many of the collaborators in this book and early readers. And I loved Jean Olang, who's wrote one of our chapters, used the phrase, people, it's when you can find your real and intoxicating purpose. And I love this idea of intoxicating, right? We talk a lot about, I need to find my purpose, my true purpose, my clear purpose. But an intoxicating purpose is something you behave really differently around, right? It's that thing that it just fills you up and you have to have it, right? And when purpose can become an addiction, if you will, in a positive sense, then you're going to work not to file a report or do the tasks, whether you do them or AI does them. You're going to work because at the other side of that effort is something that gets you closer to achieving that purpose. And I think we have very largely as human beings lost sight of purpose in our work. Right? We in the Adaptation Advantage, which I wrote with Heather McGowan and 2019, we talk about the three questions, right? And the questions are, what do you want to be when you grow up? What's your major in college? What do you do? Right? We've framed this identity around your work. But when you change the questions to, what do you love to do? What gives you joy? What's the best day at work you've ever had? That stops talking about, I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, I'm a physician, I'm a elected official, and moves you to a place of really identifying purpose. What do I do that I feel makes a contribution, has an impact, connects me in a sense of belonging with community? I think that's what we're reaching for in this time, is how do we come together as in a community of belonging toward a collective purpose. And so that's yes was the shorter answer, but that's a much longer answer. And I think how we think about whether that's reinvention or just self-exploration, to understand, why do I do this? And I think that we see so much disengagement from work today because we're very attached to the titles and the tasks and not embracing the purpose.
I love the call for, leading with a curious mind and exploration and calling to purpose. And, I guess in my years in change and business transformation, whenever we've spoken to the leaders about finding the bigger why and the purpose, it's been, it's a bit fluffy. Let's just work to the strategy. What is it? What are the outcomes? What are we trying to achieve? What are the goals and milestones? So I think it almost feels like you need to pause and think about purpose, but it's almost a luxury that we don't necessarily have with the pace of change that we're going through. And I feel that professionals that are joining us on this broadcast may feel a little rushed to get up to speed with the latest prompting, with the latest AI skill set, with the latest advancement of what's going on in their particular environment. I know you had 26 brilliant minds writing together for Leading for Tomorrow. If you could package it in different sections, and I know the book calls for different sections, working towards defining your own purpose, working towards, leading for the organization and leading yourself. Like, what are some of these ideas and tips that our professionals can look at working towards and building towards?
Yeah, well, I want to challenge something you said a moment ago, which was that finding your purpose was a luxury, or that thinking about your why was a fluffy thing. And yes, I agree. When we wrote The Empathy Advantage, I had people say to me, well, empathy, that just means people get away with stuff, right? You just have to be nice all the time, and, which is, I think, a very minimalist view of what empathy is. But it's seen as these things, we often talk about them as soft skills, right? How leaders need to have these soft, how do we talk to people and do these things? They are essential, right? And I think that your understanding your purpose isn't a nice to have, it's an essential. Um, and we have for a very long time lived in a world where it was treated like, okay, you're gonna go to school and you're gonna learn how to do this job. And at 22, you're gonna start doing that job. And when you hit your early 60s, God willing, you can retire, then go have all the purpose you want. Right? But just do the work. There's a reason we call it work. I don't think that model works anymore for people, right? You see, I was reading one this morning. Gen Z is detached from work, and it's I think because there is this lack of meaning, and I don't blame anyone for that. Yeah, will there be some jobs that are just jobs? No doubt, right? And even in jobs that are just jobs, there is always, it seems to me, the individuals who can find a greater meaning in that, the reason they're doing it. It may not be that I'm doing this job in, um, janitorial services because I want to be the best janitor, or I think that cleanliness is next to godliness, or whatever my grand purpose is, but I might be doing it because I'm getting to interact with interesting people and I'm feeling part of this organization that's doing this bigger thing. And by my making sure that the floors are clean, that'll enables other people to do their work as one. I don't know, I'm inventing as I go here, but my point really is, you have a lot of choices in life, and you're gonna get more and more and more choices in life. Why not choose the things that bring meaning to you? And I think you can find meaning in work if you just take the breath to do that and to understand why you are showing up every day. And maybe the showing up every day is because I need to make enough money so that I can go backpack through Europe. That's okay, right? But you're working to a purpose. It may be because if I do this work, I can cure cancer, and that needs to happen, right? There are all sorts of vectors of purpose, and no one is, I think, here to tell anybody that your purpose is right or your purpose is wrong. It's the thing that gives you the motivation to be engaged, to feel a sense of belonging with a community that's bigger than you. And that, I think, is the objective of meaningful work, that we find a way to be in community and build and create value together. Now, we've coming through a system that has said the purpose of a corporation is to return value to shareholders. And that Friedman doctrine, I don't think holds any longer. And if we continue to transfer wealth to the top portion of a percent of humans on the planet, we are going to end up in a place that is very unattractive in my imagination. I talk about it's pitchforks and torches, because human beings need something more than just to scrape by and be happy with their lot in life. They need to be in a place of creation and creativity and community, and that, I think, is really what this current moment is going to allow us to do.
Yeah, and I hope it really can translate to, not only top economic environments, but also to lower socioeconomic, where, the bills really do need to get paid. And whether I have a purpose or not, I still have to turn up to this job, because if I don't do this, I will lose my housing and so on. So I think in the sense of that, some of us have the luxury to stop and think and to go, how can I reframe this so that I can lead myself in a better way? And hopefully that trickles down to the lower socioeconomic positions where people don't necessarily have that opportunity to do that. Now, does AI give us that opportunity by taking some of the grunt work away that we can think about curiously? Well, what would I actually like to do? Hopefully, I really hope. I'm an optimist, and I'd love to think that that would be the case.
I'm with you 100%. And I am not naive, right? We are in a time of incredible income inequality. We have people in the United States who are literally, living under bridges and in their cars because housing in the San Francisco Bay Area is extraordinarily expensive. Those people need something different. And do some of them need to, like, I don't know, ponder their purpose? Maybe everyone does. I think people who have the economic, we'll call it luxury, also have a responsibility in their communities to think about how we change these systems, right? Because these systems were built to, in my opinion, tamp down our sense of agency, surrender it to the boss or to the organization or to something else, right? So there's nothing I can do about this because that's just the way it is, right? That's a mindset that has been instilled in generations for a very long time, I fear. And and it has been about, again, extracting, right? So you come to work so that this company can make money, so our shareholders and our executives can become wealthy. Well, that is now writ so large, right? This may be the one thing I would be very grateful to Elon Musk for, is that he has made visible this vast wealth disparity. I think there's a responsibility on those of us who have had opportunity to live and work in a more purposeful way to think about what systems got us here that aren't getting everybody here. Why is it in a corporation that only the top executives and the board members and the shareholders make money? Why is not everyone in the organization a shareholder in this organization and getting value from it? If AI is going to take over tasks and there is cost reduction, how does that cost reduction then play out to the human beings that I'm going to want to have do different things or think about things differently? I think that executives who are looking at AI as a cost reduction mechanism are simply asking to obsolete themselves and their companies more quickly. One of the things that I always get some funny looks when I'm talking to executive teams, leadership teams, and I say, what is AI really, really good at? It's good at making decisions. What do CEOs do? They make decisions. So whose job is going to be most affected by AI? And you want to say, oh, it's all those early coders, those guys, we can get rid of them. I'm not so sure that's the answer. And so I think we need to rethink what these tools are for, how we use them, how they create advantage and opportunity in our organization, not just how they help us automate things so that things will be cheaper to run.
Yeah. And yes, decision making and synthesizing information so you can get a more holistic picture of where we're headed and all of the things you're perhaps not considering or you're missing out. I mean, that's one of the items that we wanted to talk about as a takeaway from this. If we circle back to some of the things that people can do, after this session, is to focus on using AI for getting a more holistic view. So you had an example that you use AI for, saying whenever you try to think of an idea or of a position.
Yeah. Well, I've decided I've eschewed the language of AI as a thinking partner. I don't want to anthropomorphize AI. It's a tool. But I find that it can be a really valuable tool. I am often trying to synthesize very large amounts of data and email and reading, and to be able to say, "Hey, here's all of this that got dumped on my desk this morning. What what am I really, based on what I have shared with you, AI, over all these months of conversation, what's most important for me? Prioritize this. That's a great efficiency. And now I can use my judgment in dealing with that information. I can say, I have this idea, and I really think such and such is true, but I need to know who else is thinking like this. Show me the references to people who are thinking like this, or articles about this. And it might come back and say, oh, you're a genius and you're so, the only person in the world. And I totally know that's not, can't possibly be true, right? So then I start to ask questions like, so tell me what's wrong with my argument. What are the flaws? What am I missing? Forcing
Yes.
the tools to start digging and looking in a different way for things that I would do if I had, endless hours and a giant library. Fortunately, I do have that now, right? I have this in this large language model. And so what I love, and there's a chapter in this book written by Hal Gregerson, and I just think it's so important because he talks about asking the right questions, asking better questions. Um, my brother is a K through 12 educator and an education leader, and he said to his teachers once, if Alexa can answer the question that you're posing to your students, it's a bad question. We don't want to teach these kids to be able to look up facts. We want them to think about things in more deep ways. Well, I think that's true with AI too, right? I can ask it questions in a way that go deeper than the obvious, right? It's really good at pulling that stuff out, and sometimes it finds a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense at all, and sometimes it makes stuff
Yeah.
up. Um, but if we apply our critical thinking and our critical questioning to the tool, I think we get to some better and more interesting, uh, I think, self-discovery, right? Where I think X is true, and now after spending 30 minutes really probing that, I see where I missed something, and now it changes the way I think about this thing. That's not AI telling me how to think, that's AI helping me surface other perspectives. And I think that's a better use than AI, please write a 3-page memo telling me all the things that I need to tell my boss about the plan that she wants me to build.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that it's actually applicable to everything we do today, right? Rather than getting it to write the report, what is it that I haven't thought about? What are some of the considerations that I didn't think with this approach and people not really buying into it? Or we've got a new project starting up and there's some challenges laid out along the way. What should I be thinking about alongside those challenges that, I haven't encountered before?
What would surprise me? What's
What
going
would
to trip
surprise
me
me? I
up?
love that.
What are the reasons this might fail? There's a
Yeah.
concept I love of a pre-mortem, right? And you're starting a project. We're very good at doing post-mortem. We did this project, and why did it fail, or what
Yes.
did happened in it? But to do a pre-mortem, to start with, what could go wrong, and what can we learn about what we need to do based on an understanding of what could go wrong or how this could fail? I mean, those are kind of questions you can ask a large language model and get some insights that prevent you from making those mistakes in the first place. So I think they're again, it's asking good questions in a way that starts to turn the prism and give you different perspective. That then you take your own intelligence and your own lived experience and do that synthesis to make your own recommendations or to form your own strategy and action.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And on the pre-mortem, I had a guest a couple of weeks ago, Bob McGannon, who was also talking about doing a pre-mortem on a project. So it definitely, all of these ideas seem to conjoin and form something that we can actually use the intelligence of the AI to give us judgment and intelligence to make the decisions that we need to make rather than deciding blindly in the direction.
And I think that the one thing I want to just maybe put a double click on this is that the piece that AI is never going to bring to the table is the lived experience, that human experience. Right? And so that's the layer, both in your questioning and then in your digestion of the answers, that you bring in a way that is what makes the the outcome of those discussions most human and most applicable and important, right? It's that lived experience that you bring to these questions and you bring to the answers that gets you to that place. And it's easy to cut and paste from an AI into a document. And then you're kind of basically saying, I'm going to surrender my ownership and my agency of this document because I didn't really think about it that hard. I read it and said, oh, this sounds good. I think that the team's going to like it. Um, and I think that's a person saying, okay, I'm done. Now I can go golf. And that's great. I mean, golf is fine. But is it really what's going to make you feel like you're contributing in your work environment? I don't know, maybe not.
Yes. And to circle back to the book, there's a section called Lead Others, and I think that what you were saying just now about how you contribute. If you could summarize one or a couple of actions that people can do about leading others and how they would put that into practice, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think in a very umbrella kind of sense, it really is about embracing your humanity and their humanity, right? And we might call that empathy, or we might call it something else. Often we call them the soft skills, right? These are the things that, it's not necessarily data analytics, but you probably ought to use some empathy when you go in there. But I think it's those skills that are going to become the superpowers of leaders, right? It's skills like the ability to, embracing your vulnerability, owning it, being able to say, I don't know, let's go find out. It's the ability to listen deeply and to say, tell me more about that. Where are you coming from? What informs that perspective? I don't necessarily agree, but I want to learn from you. Those kinds of deeply, I think, vulnerable and empathetic conversations are super important. I think there's also this whole other layer of things like bravery, right? You have to be really brave to lead a team today, right? Because there's so much that's unknown and the ground is shaking under all of us. And so recognizing it doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means you're willing to take a deep breath and keep moving forward. Demonstrating that bravery, I think, becomes important. And then something that sounds as squishy as, and you're not going to see it in, well, maybe my next leadership book, but talking about love. How do you create love and a sense of belonging and a sense of valuing people around you, even when you don't agree with them, even when they get on your last nerve? There's got to be a way to express you are valuable, you're valuable to this organization, you're valuable as a human being. Maybe what you're doing in this organization is no longer a fit for the organization, so let's figure out how to find your value and happiness somewhere else. That's a much more compassionate way of leading change in your organization than saying, you missed your quarter, you're fired. Right? Because nobody learns from that other than I missed my quarter and now I don't have a job. So where do we kind of inject a real humanity that I think is where all that opportunity gets discovered, right? It's that person who says, I saw something like this once back in the day when I was doing something entirely different, and maybe if we did that, it would work. That kind of, hey, connecting the dots doesn't happen in a checklist kind of a work assignment. So how do we get to know what people are capable of if we're not actually getting to know the people themselves?
Yeah, I love this call that we need to start doing things differently. There's going to be different activities that we need to do, but we also need to start being different as well. So changing our behavior and our expectations, not only around what other people are doing, but how we're doing it as current leaders, as future leaders.
Yeah, I think that that's true in both. Like, how do we lead ourselves, right? How do we lead ourselves and present ourselves in our organization as leaders at any level of the organization? I think it's also about what do we accept, right? If I accept an angry coworker coming in and yelling at me and calling me names and telling me I'm not adding value. And I go, well, he's just having a bad day. Let's, whatever. I'm saying to everybody else around me, it's okay to put yourself, sort of, put yourself on the back burner and let this angry temperament be the thing that leads our day. Or you could stand up and say, stop. You're clearly having a bad day. This isn't working. We need to approach this conversation in a different way. Hard to do, but I think that's the kind of agency that we need to reclaim. The ability to say, I see something, I'm going to be respected and I'm going to respect. And I'm going to listen to your ideas when I don't agree with them. And I'm going to respect that you have those ideas, and let's figure out where we find common ground, or do we together find a new place? That's, I think, starts with how you're leading yourself and what you are giving and what you're accepting, so that you are also in a position then to model the behavior in the organization that says everyone here has value, everyone contributes, and everyone will be respected for their contribution. Doesn't mean we're going to do what you say necessarily, but it means we're going to listen with respect so that we can get the best ideas on the table, get the best learning on the table, and really help people feel like they're empowered and have the agency to contribute and make change in the organization.
And I think it also calls for us to be open to experimentation. We've spoken about trying different things and being very curious, and let's see if this works, and what if we try this. But also it calls for the fact that there will be experiments that don't work out, right? Sure. There will be mistakes along the way. So I think having comfort with us having failures and learning from failure, I think it's a brilliant learning journey that we need to embrace. And I'd love to hear from you on this one, with all of the experience that you've had and all of the different hypes that you've seen. What is something that you got wrong, and how did you learn from it so that it brought a positive impact to you, to your journey?
Oh, I've gotten so much wrong. It's just the nature of it, right? Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. And it's very few people who can learn without some kind of a mistake or a failure. And so it is. I think our instinct, my instinct, I don't want to speak for the world, is to say, it's like, you cut your finger and you go like this, like you're shaking the pain away, right? I just need that to go away. And so I'm going to forget about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to dwell on it. I got to move forward. And I think that's a lost opportunity. It's perfectly natural, right? Nobody wants to dwell on that. I've been working in kind of back cycles for a long time on a I don't know if it's a book or what it will ultimately be, but I've titled it "Failure: A Love Story." And I open this the little bit of writing I've done to it, and I talk about the fact that I have failed. I have failed as an entrepreneur. I've closed businesses. I failed in personal relationships, and I even failed kindergarten. So I am a kindergarten flunky, and it's just part of you just have to acknowledge what happened in those situations so that you learn from them and you grow from them. But when I first talked to someone, a friend of mine, about this project, she said, well, of course you'll talk about your own failure. And I went, what do you mean? Like, oh no, I can't. And then it was where I had to
I want to talk about other people's failures.
Right? I want to talk about other people's examples of failure, not mine. So I think that's important. I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, and I think the fact that this was John was a leader in a military contracting, military industrial complex kind of company. So big company, huge budgets, responsible for really big, important things. And he was brought in to kind of change the culture of this particular organization, to deal with, whatever the particular business outcomes were. And he did a couple of things that were really interesting. First of all, he celebrates failure. He said, so-and-so came to me and said something, we got the wrong part. I said, great, let's have a pizza party. In fact, let's have an ice cream social in the executive dining room. You guys, have you ever seen it? Come on up. Let's look. He basically made coming forward with failures and mistakes a benefit, right? In that, because what he didn't want was for people not to tell him things that didn't work, right? He needed to have transparency into all parts of the organization. So by saying, great, mistake, good on you, thanks for bringing it forward, we're going to go have some ice cream. That changed the culture where people stopped being afraid to make mistakes and became more comfortable at least informing about them, because they knew that they weren't going to get in trouble or get fired necessarily, but they were, and that they were helping the organization by bringing these things to the fore. The other thing he did was create a system, and I'm sure you all have seen it. You come out of a public fast food joint or a public restroom, and there's the smiley face buttons, and like, are you happy or sad with your experience?
Yes.
It's a dashboard that's almost that simple in the organization. He asked two questions to everybody, top to bottom. Um, you know, did we make the decision? Are we on plan with the decision? Is the first one, and the second one is, are you happy about it? How do you feel about it? And he said, it's a weird thing to ask people, but it's a perfect indicator of whether we're on track or not. Because if we're making decisions but we feel bad about them, something's not right. And he said, when that happens, and we have daily stand-ups and we talk about this very simple system where I see those differences, I can say, well, here's a decision that was made, but it's anonymous, someone's not happy with it. What do we think's going on? And then that person has the ability to raise a hand and say, well, that was me, and this is what I think. And he told me the story of uh, somebody who was kind of a mainline manufacturing line employee who was, yes, we made the decision. No, I'm not happy. I'm not comfortable. And the issue was that the product we usually use is green, and the one we're using for this product is pink, and I just don't know if that's the same or if they're different. And everything in the purchase order and the delivery notes said it was the same product, but when they looked into it, they found that those products had two different capabilities. And one was used in high heat situations and the other in high cold situations or something. And so it was being misapplied, essentially, this product. And they caught it within a day and were able to correct. He said, if that person didn't feel comfortable saying, something's not right here, we would have run a whole production line and had have installed failure into this new product. So just
Yes.
asking the question, how did you feel about your day to day? Did it, is that, how are things going? You're making progress, but how do you feel about the progress? They're two different questions, but they get at the same issue, which is, are we on progress, on the right track? And where are we diverging from whatever the right track is to identify potential failures sooner? And I think that's a learning, right? Because we've learned so much that failure comes at the end, or failure comes from the catastrophe when everything blows up, literally and figuratively. And now when you start to surface those things earlier, you're getting that learning earlier. And yes, you will still have failures, but those failures are going to be different failures, and hopefully not as catastrophic a failure.
Yes, and I think building a culture where people feel like they can speak up after they've made a failure and not hide it and go, oh my goodness, I've done this boo boo, but I can't talk about it because there are going to be repercussions. And I think that talks a lot about the leaders of tomorrow. How do we build those places that are inclusive, that promote experimentation, that promote a learner's mindset? And a lot of the contributors that you had for the books are all talking to these aspects.
Yeah. And I think that it really starts to separate responsibility from blame. I might be responsible for that failure, that mistake, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to work on course correction because that's fundamental to the outcomes. But I can be responsible without being blamed in a way that it's, you were lazy or stupid or careless, or it wasn't me, it was that guy. we start to take responsibility, and in taking responsibility, we have the opportunity for correction and improvement. And I think that when you don't have the safety, and Amy Edmondson is one of our contributors who initiated this idea of psychological safety. When you don't have the safety to say, there's something wrong here, we need to fix it, then you shift from a responsibility game to a blame game. And that rarely ever goes well, at least in my experience.
Chris, this has been a wonderfully rich conversation. I am so thrilled to have your expertise and knowledge. We promised people that they can take away a really tangible checklist at the end of this conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to package some of the ideas and the insights that we shared here into a takeaway that people can apply straight away. Or if they come up on a Tuesday morning and they go, oh, I heard this really insightful conversation about leading for tomorrow, but I don't know how to actually do it. We're going to package it and give some really concrete tips of how people can apply those concepts. If people wanted to get in touch with you or follow you, what is the best place for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place. And I'm C Shipley 9, I think, is my ID on LinkedIn. And I spend probably more time there than I should. But that's one place. You'll find me on Substack, and my emails and other contacts are pretty readily available with a quick search. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about these issues. I really do think that we are in this liminal time from the way life used to be and the way work used to be to a new and I think greater opportunity, an opportunity for us to be living a more fulfilling, purposeful human life. And anyone who wants to work on those challenges and recreating our systems to get us there sooner, I'd love to have that conversation.
And of course, Chris has got a number of courses on LinkedIn Learning. So if you folks are interested in taking up some of Chris's ideas and learning firsthand, you can find her courses on LinkedIn Learning as well.
Thanks for that. I always forget that, but it's so much fun to do those and to hear from people who are taking those courses.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the really great, thought-provoking questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.